Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. I'm very excited to introduce my guest tonight, and I'm excited as always, but this one is really particularly interesting because John Fischer is with me, and he's going to be talking to us, telling us his story, and then going on to describe how he went on to developing apps that use hypnosis to help people live a happier, clearer life with better sleep, with relaxed muscles, and a variety of different things. So John, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to have you, man. This is going to be, I'm very interested, and to be honest, I mean, hypnosis when I was younger and even recently is something that kind of scares me. Like I just told you before the call, I always looked at it as something that, someone's going to make me bark like a dog and I'm never going to remember it in front of an audience. So
Right.
I think a lot of the listeners are going to have that same kind of, preconceived notion. So I'm excited to hear, your thoughts on it, how it's different. And by the way, just to the listeners, John Deside's apps, we'll get to that later, the Mindify apps. I tried it for deep sleep. It was fantastic, relaxing, and all around great. But as always, I like to start these shows to hear your story because this podcast is very much about helping, young adults who are on the verge of graduation, who've just graduated, to understand what it is that, life might be bringing for them, and to really find themselves and see what it is, or what are the different unique things that people are doing to overcome graduation in their own unique ways. So if you could give us your story there, I'd love to start it.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I graduated in 1994 from the University of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went to 3 colleges before then. I was a filmmaking major, thinking I wanted to write and direct and do that whole thing. But then I switched to psychology, and my intention was I'll get a degree in psychology and then go off and perhaps get a doctorate in some area of psychology. And I just didn't find that it had enough interest to me to actually go through and pursue and get a PhD in that. So I skipped it. I just said, what, I'm going to do some other things. And it really led me on a path to take the easy way in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I really ended up doing things that for a long time didn't challenge me. So I graduated with this degree in psychology, and went into working with children with autism, preschoolers with autism, which was challenging, but it wasn't a full-time job at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a lot of temp work in social services, and then I went on to actually work in social services for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Off and on.
And what were you doing with the children with autism? Was it schooling, counseling? What was the actual focus?
It was like a day program, kind of like going to preschool in a sense, in that they would go and it was just heavily structured where it was a 1-to-1 ratio, where you were assigned a specific child, and from the moment they got off their transportation, whatever it was, to when they came in and then they left and got on their transportation at the end of the day, you were with this individual and interacting the whole time in a very structured situation where there was every 10, 15 minutes, this is what we do next, this is what we do next. And it was really interesting because I was doing that in the morning, and then they would go home, and in the afternoon I had a friend who was starting up a daycare, and I would volunteer kind of helping her get this daycare. She bought a building and whatever, this pretty major daycare going in, and so I saw kids of the same age, but one was with autism, or on the autistic spectrum, and one was your standard, typical child. And it was really interesting in that, even without being told, I could tell that it wasn't an intelligence difference. It was just how they were reacting or not reacting to me in my presence.
Wow, okay, yeah.
It was really interesting to see that sort of combination, that comparison. It was just very moving.
Right. Yeah, it's understanding that they're people too. It's just the way they react and respond to the world is slightly different. I've done some work with people with mental and physical disabilities as well, and you come to realize we all want the same things. We just have different ways of saying it. And then people go, I've heard people say, oh, but they're different. I'm like, listen, I'm from Jersey. Our accent's different. The way we communicate is different, all right? Like, everybody is different, but we all want the same love, affection, and just connection with people.
Exactly, and I would say, from what I've learned since, looking back at that experience, what I could say is a good rule of thumb is everything that anyone does is communication. So if you're working with an individual, or like in this case a preschooler with autism, every single thing that they do is communicating something to me. Mm-hmm. And it may not be with words, and the specific person I was working with, it was rarely with words. Mm-hmm. But it could have been with a scream, or a look, or a self-injurious behavior, something that was telling me something that they wanted me to know. Mm-hmm. And it was just fascinating, because if let's say they had a sensory issue, how would you react if the situation you're in, it was so bright or so loud that you couldn't function and you didn't have the language or capacity to communicate that?
Yeah,
and that was the experience.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting too is I guarantee, hopefully it's you hope that the listeners will have an open mind, but I'm sure there will be people that will listen and go, oh, well, that's still really different. I'm not like that, or I am normal, quote unquote, which none of us are normal, let's be honest. But, right. But they say, oh, I would never do that. Like you said, a self-destructive behavior. Well, right. How many of us have, oh my God, she dumped me. I'm going to go get really, really drunk and that'll make me feel better. That's a self-destruct, I mean, there's different types of levels of things. There's different levels of, reactions and the way that people respond to the world. But it's like when you really look at it, there's so much similarity, no matter where somebody comes from, their background, their history. Right. There's so much that we can relate to.
Right.
So you worked with the children with autism, you assisted with the daycare, and then you got into social services. And what were some of the things you did and learned while being in social services?
Well, for about 2 to 3 years, I was doing a lot of temp work. So I worked in a lot of different places, mm-hmm. Doing anything you could imagine, from changing adult diapers to severely mentally handicapped individuals, to just doing different outings, to doing little classes, and so many different things. There's really nothing I haven't experienced. It was a wide range of diagnoses, everything. I mean, from on the autistic spectrum to mental health issues to schizophrenia to there's really no behavior I haven't seen. Mm-hmm. I kind of got used to chaos revolving around me in those situations where nothing really fazed me after a while. Mm-hmm. Because that's just how people communicate again.
Right.
They communicate by running up behind you and grabbing really hard the back of your knee for one individual. You have to know that about them. Mm-hmm. But that might mean that they're hungry or tired or just want attention or something else. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it was. Right. And looking back, again, I felt I was taking the easier route. As even though sometimes it wasn't that easy, it was a trying job at times, it was easy for me. It wasn't challenging for me, and I wasn't really doing anything I was passionate about. I was mm-hmm. playing it safe. Right. It leads me to recall something that I had heard actually Jim Carrey say at a, I believe it was a graduation graduation ceremony, not too long ago actually. He had said that when he was growing up in Canada, his dad, to support their family, took a job that was safe. Mm-hmm. A safe, stable job so that his dad could support the family. And he worked it for however many years. And then he lost. He was laid off from his safe, stable job. And Jim Carrey said, and what that taught me is, if you can lose a job, if you can be laid off from a job that you don't like, then you should really go into something that you do like and you love. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's a quote I heard as well, and it just resonates so much because people right. think they're doing the safe thing, right? We're given that formula: right. Hey, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and then, right. like I said in the intro for this podcast, Oh, and the implication is you do all that, life's just going to figure itself out, right? And then we buy into the other lies that, oh, well, we just need to follow the path, right? Climb the corporate ladder, make more money, get more things. And then it's always this deferred happiness plan. We don't realize we can be happy now. We don't realize we can pursue our wild, crazy dreams that no one believes. It's but there's always, there's going to be someone to help. But sometimes those crazy, wonderful things that happen in life are because it took one person believing when no one else did.
Right.
So for you, you're at this point, you're doing social services, you've given a lot back, you're doing a lot of service, and you're helping a lot of people, but you're not feeling in your heart that's what you're meant to do, or that's where your passion lies. So what was the transformation? What was the next step?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that I'm doing this job that, and I enjoy it. Like I say, it just wasn't challenging. But I love the clients, and I look forward to going, and they were really, I was seeing my friends every day is what the clients were, and still are, actually.
Great, yeah.
It was, to be quite honest, it was also nice that if somebody asked me, so what do you do? They would say, oh, that's so admirable, that's so this, that. And it felt good, like, hey, I may not be making a lot of money, I may not be challenging myself, but they don't have to know that. Afraid to try other things, but they don't have to know that. Definitely don't have to know that. But hey, I get this prestige of, oh, he's doing something that's so admirable. It's so nice. And it isn't rewarded in our culture because you don't make anything doing it. So clearly we we learned that that's not something we necessarily are behind. But that was one reason I stayed. And along the way, I tried a lot of other things. So I did some acting, I did some writing, because I had enough free time, because again, this job did not challenge me. So I had all this free time to try all these other things, and eventually, one thing was hypnosis. I had learned about hypnosis as a psychology student, and actually one of my professors was a psychologist who demonstrated hypnosis in the class, so we learned about it, and then he actually hypnotized somebody. So unlike most people, I went into it, and in fact, unlike you, which is very typical, I saw it as something that was not per se magical, and certainly not scary or controlling, or something where you could make someone do something. I saw it as a wonderful tool to access a deeper part of all of us.
Right.
So I went to a school and I just started learning about hypnosis and hypnotherapy, and I learned about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and eventually became a trainer in NLP.
Oh, and John, just could you break down NLP a bit? Because I recently read The Game by Neil Strauss, and that was the first I'd heard about it, but from my understanding, it's kind of visual triggers or movements that someone does to anchor an idea, and then when they do that, it's almost like a Pavlov's dog kind of response. Is that correct? Or
it is that, and it is a lot of things.
Okay.
It's I've heard one person say, and this is somebody I think who was promoting NLP, but they had said, if you're doing something that works, that's what NLP is. And I thought, well, that's kind of that's an easy way out of your description for your field. If it's working, it must be NLP.
Could you imagine him in a business meeting?
Like I say, it's neuro-linguistic programming. It's a fancy name for a lot of different ideas drawn from a lot of different sources. Basically, these two guys, Bandler and Grinder, they looked at people who were getting results in human change. And they just kind of draw, like, what are they doing that we can learn from? So there's hypnotic elements, like you say, there's anchoring elements, there's a lot of different things that humans can do to get results in ourselves and in positive behavior change in others. So what is it exactly? You could say it's a trail of techniques, it's a philosophy on life, one being, we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have. That if you want to do better, give someone, or you want somebody else to do better, give them more resources, give them more choices.
Right. Okay. Okay. Very cool.
And yes, it has to do with going inside and accessing pictures and accessing how you create your reality. There's a lot of things to it, but it's weird because I almost find it impossible to separate hypnosis and NLP. They're so interconnected for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting because it's like the more I learn about these things, the more curious I am. And
Right.
what's a very consistent theme that keeps coming back in many of these interviews that I'm doing that are so distinct, such different backgrounds, from a UFC fighter to a yoga instructor to a spiritual medium. It's all across the board. It keeps coming back to knowing yourself and looking inside. And
Right.
it's something I said in my last interview. It's terrifying for people, but it is one of the most rewarding and liberating experiences when you really get to know yourself, who you are, and you embrace it. So
yes.
you said you get it. So you started getting into hypnosis, started getting into NLP, and what happened after that?
Well, it really kind of gelled things together as far as bringing my past and my education with what I was kind of getting into, and getting into as far as self-improvement things, and really looking at myself and thinking, well, what is it that I want to do? So yes, I was using it so that I could use it to help clients, but it was also used as a self-discovery thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, it's all about looking inside. And when someone says, well, hypnosis is scary, you're going to get me to do something that I don't want to do, and that isn't necessarily really possible.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call them suggestions for a reason. It's not commands you give somebody, although sometimes it seems like that.
Right.
It's suggestions. So you're ideally getting them into a relaxed state, into what I would call a suggestible state, but not a command state, not a 100% receptive state. But you're just kind of loosening things up so you can talk to that deeper part of that person that's within all of us, that, again, is doing the best they can with the resources they have.
Mm-hmm.
So I may be giving suggestions, but ultimately it's that person's, you could call it their unconscious, you could call it their subconscious, their core, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but it's that deeper part of them that knows what they should be doing.
Wow, okay. And
so I'm giving them options, and then really at some point it's their unconscious or that deeper part that says, I'll pick this one.
Right, yeah. And it's so interesting now, actually, having done one of the meditation tracks, because, I mean, just for the listener, so when he talks about being put or being given suggestions or being in a suggestible state, it's like, it sounds like, oh, they're going to trick me, but it really, at no point are you, so deep or so far gone, like you see in the movies, that you would, if they said, now slap yourself in the face, you'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right, why would I do that?
Right, that makes no sense. And but it gets you to a point where you kind of quiet down that chatter, that nonstop every day, oh my God, what about this? I got to get groceries, I got to get that. You just kind of slow down for a minute and let yourself listen to what it is you should be doing. So that's fantastic. It makes a lot more sense now, too.
Right, and that's really what happens, because, like you would listen to the sleep one or the relaxation one.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things that I would be working on with people, whether it's the sleep or losing weight or any kind of self-improvement, any of them, you already have the answer. You're maybe not aware of all the possible choices you could have made or you could make right now, yet you have the answers within you.
Mm-hmm.
So when I give choices, it's the unconscious mind saying, I would rather do this. I've heard once an example where if somebody was going to say, well, if somebody said, I'm going to go rob a bank, and you would say, well, okay, well, what do you hope to get? I'm hoping I will, walk away with like $100,000. And if you were to say that to that person, how about instead of robbing the bank, I give you $100,000?
Mm-hmm.
How many people would still rob the bank? They go, okay, great, that's a lot easier. It's safer, it's not against the law, I'll take it.
Right.
It's giving somebody alternatives so that, in this case, even the conscious mind knows that that's a better choice.
Right, yeah.
But your unconscious is the one that, it's really guiding the show, and if somebody has what they would call a negative behavior, whatever it is, an addiction, you can't sleep, you're eating too much, whatever it is, if someone has a negative behavior, the question is, and this is something I can't answer because they'll have to answer it for themselves, is what is it serving for them?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything we do at some level, we're doing because that deeper level believes we're doing it in our best interest.
Right.
And it's in what I'm doing is communicating with the person, it's kind of like a dialogue with their deeper self saying, I know you think, let's say, smoking relaxes you or makes you cool or makes you fit in with the crowd you want to fit in or maintains your weight or whatever, and you know that there are other ways to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that their conscious mind, probably their adult mind even knows that that's true, but they were told so many years ago that smoking was the way to be cool.
Right.
That it was a way to maintain their weight. And you just have to let it know that, but there are other ways. And you know what those are, and give them other suggestions. Let their unconscious and their conscious mind work together to come up with other ideas. Mm-hmm. And to know that there's just a better choice out there. And that applies to everything.
That's amazing. What it sounds like to me as you're, working through, describing this process more and more, it essentially sounds like what these apps do is help people quiet down the everyday chatter, quiet down kind of the nonsense that's just in their minds so that they can connect with their problem-solving center. Because, there's that person or that thing, that idea inside of us that has the answer. Like, a lot of times we say, I wish I just knew. I wish I just knew how to blank. Things we know, very often we know, all right, if you want to get healthy, it's like, all right, find a good workout routine that fits you, change your diet. People know these things. Right. But like you said, so often, pretty much I think all cases, there's a deeper emotional or psychological issue that is just keeping you in that repetitive pattern. So what I'm curious to know, so you got into hypnosis. When did that evolve into developing and creating hypnosis apps and the Mindify apps?
Right, yeah, I finished the program and I continued to take NLP classes, and I'm always reading something. I consistently have at least 4 books going. They're all nonfiction information books.
Wow.
So whenever I do a new app, I'm reading a lot about that area, so I don't go into there completely blind. I'm like, I want to have some background. So I'm always reading things.
How many books have you read, would you say?
I haven't the slightest idea. I wouldn't even know how to answer that. I'm just reading stuff like all the time. I'm reading 2 hypnosis books right now. I just finished one on meditation. I'm reading one on various world cultures. It's always something.
Listen, I'm with you.
I couldn't guess how many books.
I'm reading some really deep stuff. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Seuss, but man, I'm having trouble getting through those.
It is deep.
It honestly, it is deep. It is. If you look at it, there's a lot of but I was trying to think of like a simple picture book, See Spot Run or something. So.
Yeah.
All right, so you're reading books, you're educating yourself on the.
And I was seeing clients at an actual office or a couple of offices, and I would see clients one-to-one. And what I discovered is I wasn't really that into seeing clients one-to-one.
Okay.
I'm like, I enjoy part of it, but I hated that the idea of having to go out and find all these clients, and you spend 20 times as many, or I ended up spending 20 times as much time finding one client. It's just so much time devoted to it for what I felt like I was getting out of it. And I wasn't really enjoying that interaction as much as I guess hoped.
Right.
So I basically backed off of that, still learned things, and if a friend needed some help, peripherally, you do a little bit. I don't do any big issues, but I kind of stayed in touch with the material. And then I had a friend who was doing some hypnosis tracks and making some money on it. And somebody, 2 people approached them and said, hey, we'd like to partner up with you. And he said, wow, you look great, or you seem great. And he ended up signing a business contract. And then my friend and I, we went out to dinner once, not long after this happened. And he said, I'm in a conundrum where I've signed this business contract with these new people, but I'm also doing some other business things hypnotically with this other person. Mm-hmm. And she's like, it's really a conflict of interest, and I have to back out, but I don't want to back out unless I give them another referral. Would you be interested?
Wow, okay.
And I'm like, well, tell me more. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so he starts going into it. I go, well, give me like a day. Let me think about it. Because how I'm wired is I never, and this is part of my problem, noticed is that I rarely jump right in.
Okay.
My initial response, and I'm more consciously aware of that, is no.
Mm-hmm.
Is to say, no, I'll stay home. No, I won't go. No, I won't participate.
Yes.
I know that's my initial response, so I always give myself a little time to reconsider.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can convince myself to do something. So I said, well, let me think about it. And I thought about it, and I thought, man, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to produce a quality product enough for these two business people. I don't know if I'll produce something that'll look good in the eyes of my friend who referred me. I didn't want to let him down.
All your self-doubt, that negative self-talk just comes up.
Everything came up.
Yeah.
And I thought, boy, it's going to be a lot of work. I'm still working in my other job. It's a lot of time commitment. I could fail, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, that's why I have to do it.
Awesome. I love that.
It terrified me. I said, I could really fail and let a lot of people down, at least in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it scared me so much, that's why I did it.
That's great.
And it's maybe the best decision I've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if you've read, have you read much Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth and all that?
I haven't read any, but that's part of...
I highly recommend any Joseph Campbell, but it's all mythology, and he talks about how it's how it can be used in our current life and in our current situation and whatnot.
Very cool.
But anyway, one of his things is, his moniker is follow your bliss.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever heard follow your bliss, it came from Joseph Campbell.
Awesome.
That's what he lived by. He said, he's at one point he never did anything he didn't thoroughly enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought about money. It just came. And he said, when you follow your bliss, when you follow that thing, and what is your bliss? And that's a whole other discussion, but a lot of times it's that thing that when you're doing it, you're unaware of time.
Mm-hmm.
That time could be really slowed down, really sped up, but in a good way. And you're so connected to it. It's the thing that you can't not do. And when you follow your bliss, that thing that just gets your juices flowing, it's as though, like a record, you're a needle that slides into the groove.
Wow.
I'm sort of going on my own little tangent.
Oh no, this is great.
It's like then beautiful music starts playing, and you're in this groove where everything else starts to magically fall into your path.
Wow. I love that. That's fantastic.
It's as though it's without effort. You're enjoying this thing, and all of a sudden doors are open, and windows are open, and cubby holes are opening. Everything that you didn't think could open is opening in ways you wouldn't have expected, because you're kind of riding this high and doing what you love and probably what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really amazing that since I said yes to this thing that terrified me, so many wonderful things have come into my path.
Mm-hmm.
Easily, without effort.
And John, I love the needle in the groove. I've actually never heard that analogy, and the fact that music starts playing, because music is just one of the most beautiful things in life. But what I think is so critical for the listeners to understand too is, and this is not coming from me as an expert and someone who's mastered it. That's not even that's the furthest thing from it. This is coming from a guy who has started this journey, who's had some real success and some really miserable times too. There's been a lot of ups and downs that come with life, but I've felt these glimpses, I felt these moments of when I was doing what I knew I was meant to, what I'm passionate about, that I was just filled up, that I was excited, I was suddenly connecting and meeting the people that I wanted to, that I was suddenly, it almost seems mystical to us, but it's what I tell a lot of people. I'm like, when you see that person, or you're at a party that walks into a room, you immediately want to talk to that person. They just got that bubbling energy. They're happy, they're excited. It's like that's when people talk about energy and all these kind of woo-woo concepts. It's like I'm like, just think about that. Think about when your grandma walks in and gives you a big hug and you feel safe and warm. It's like that's all the energy. And then a lot of times, in fact, most of the times, when you meet these people, it's people who know themselves, who've taken time to look inside, who have grown and who are doing what they love. When you meet somebody who's doing what they truly love, there is no mistaking it. You know, I've worked in corporate America for almost 3 years now, and I've had good jobs. I've worked with good people, but there's good and bad times. And I've met a lot of people who believe that they have to be fake to be successful, that they have to play the game and be unhappy and talk about the negative things. But I've seen people, I've experienced it myself, the more genuine you can be, the more you can truly be you, the more you will do the things you want, connect with the people you want, and grow in the ways you want.
Exactly. I'm curious, think of, you said you've had glimpses along the way?
Yes.
Of the groove or whatever.
Yeah.
What's one of the glimpses that you've had, like one of the major ones, or one that just pops in your head right now? What is one of them that occurs to you or that you've experienced?
All right, we're flipping the interview around. First person who's done this. All right. So after college, I moved out to, and we're going a little over time, but that's fine. We'll keep it reasonable. But I graduated college. I moved out to Wisconsin. I started a job, which was by all rights a good job, an exciting job in some ways. I didn't really want to be in Wisconsin, but I was in a very small town called Appleton, and I found I didn't have a lot of distractions. There really wasn't much to do, so I started learning about myself. I started reading personal development books. I just started reading more because I never used to read. I finally just read books that I wanted to, and
right.
I started to get in this groove, and the first real moment where I remember it distinctly because I was listening to Sean Stevenson stuff, and this, for the listeners, is actually where I met John, was at a Sean Stevenson conference. I was reading a lot of his stuff, listening to his speeches on YouTube, and I had been saying to myself for years that I wanted to write a book. I'd been always wanting to write a book. It was something that I loved writing. I got excited when I did it. I felt I did a good job with it. And one day, the idea slipped through my mind again. Yeah, man, it'd be great to write a book one day. And first time in my life, all of a sudden another voice spoke up. And this is the voice I finally was starting to cultivate. And it said, why not? And better yet, why not start right now? And all those negative voices jumped up, like you said, but, and then the voice spoke up again and said, no. Why not start right now? And I'm not talking like, there aren't voices in my head. I'm just saying, just in my head. And I went, oh my God, I could really do this. Like, because all the things, how am I going to get an editor? How am I going to publish? How am I going to advertise and make, blah, blah. And I was like, that's all nonsense right now.
Right.
What is stopping you from sitting down and writing? And still, even after that point, it took 2 weeks. But that was in conjunction with me running with a group called My Team Triumph, which helps people with disabilities participate in endurance events. And so I was running with them. I was meeting some fantastic people who would come from all walks of life. And I started writing this book about that story, about their story, about a young man who decides to run with them and the lessons he learns along the way. And so as I continued writing and running was a big piece of it too. I found running was like a moving meditation for me, where I found such incredible clarity. And the more I started doing these things, I spent my time writing, I spent my time exercising, and I cultivate more ideas. I started a blog. And then all of a sudden, I started doing better at work. I was happier, I was more engaged, I had better ideas, I was working more efficiently. Things just started falling into place. I started meeting people, met a girl, went on some dates. It was like, it was just all those things started working out. And it was
almost... That's the proverbial snowball effect.
Exactly, yes. And so it was this amazing, all my chores, I'd get them done on time. I'd rarely feel overwhelmed, but I was staying on top of everything settled in. And then as I shared at the conference, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and that's something that I intend to do a longer kind of individual recording on. But that her being diagnosed and ultimately passing from pancreatic cancer was the hardest time of my life, and it threw whatever fantastic groove I was in. The most important person in my life now was facing a mortal illness and, slowly battling it. And it was just, everything in my life got thrown off. So since then, it's been working to rediscover my own groove, my own passion, and my own purpose. Because there were times where I just emotionally, I just stopped caring. I didn't, and that's not me, you know. It just
I would just to jump in quick.
Yeah.
I would say that, and I know very little about it specifically, but when that happened for your mom, the diagnosis, and you said everything got thrown off, I've only seen, you did the video, correct?
Yes.
That I had watched. I think it's interesting because maybe what it did is not throw it off, but what it did is made it deeper. Because the video that I watched is a profound, I don't know, you could call it almost like a poem, toward another human being, which generally, although this should happen more often, younger people don't do. So although you might have viewed it as being thrown off, the course that seemed so great, I think that you might look back at it as being a profound step in the right direction as far as your reaction to the news and the situation.
Wow, that's a really, I again never thought of it that way. What I did say to my mom the day she told me, and it was, I remember, I'll never forget it, was, and I feel that the words that came to me were from God, were from outside me, because it was, I didn't realize the words were perfect, and I don't feel like they were my own. I feel like they were just the right words. I said, Mom, we're going to help you through this, and we're going to use it to help people. And after my mom passed, it's hard to say, but I was like, Dad, we did help her through it. And she fought beautiful. I mean, strongest person I know on the planet by far. But using her story, I've been able to connect with people I never would have before. Using the video John referred to for the listeners is a video called Helping Mom Fight Cancer with Happy. And it's a video where I used the song Happy by Pharrell, one of my mom's favorite songs, and asked my friends around the world to dance to it to show support for her, so that she'd always have something to make her feel good, something that was personal, even when things got the roughest. And that video, I just was so thankful for the people involved, because it changed her life, it changed my family's lives, and it's been able to impact a lot of people along the way. And, I made it for my mom, but I hoped that reach out, that connection, that, if you feel alone in your struggle, because a lot of times that's the worst thing in the world, is when you're going through a difficult time, you feel that no one can relate, and you feel disconnected from the world. When other people reach out and show you that connection, that love, that energy, all of a sudden, life seems to just be reinvigorated. So I know that was you're playing a dangerous game, John. You're giving the floor to a guy that loves to talk. So, but
That's okay.
this is great, and so we are a bit over, but I think what we'll do, we'll set this for 45 minutes. That gives us about 6.5 minutes, because I do want to something that you had shared with me that I didn't know prior, was that through all this, through finding this passion, through taking on these challenges, through all this growth, you dealt with some very serious health issues. And if you're willing to share, I'd be curious to learn about when that happened and what it was that happened, because I think that story helps people to understand that, listen, life isn't always perfect. There are ups and downs, there's good and bad, but there's always a way to overcome whatever the obstacle is, if you choose to look for it and you choose to find the joy and the good in life. So would you be willing to share a bit about what happened in that portion of your life?
Sure, and it ties into a couple of things. It's going to tie into your situation with your mother, and it's going to tie into, you mentioned Sean Stevenson, what I'm going to be doing some paid speaking as.
Oh, fantastic. Great. And so then we can tell people where to come see you, too. So.
Right. Well, if I go to the doctor and they have a list of medical ailments, like, have you ever had this, have you ever had that? And basically it's like, you know what? I've probably had all of them.
Oh my God.
So I was born, this should be shorter than it could be. But I was born with some heart issues. So a couple of valve problems, an aortic artery that was narrowed. I had heart surgery when I was 1.5 years. I had a disease, another heart infection disease when I was 6. That's usually fatal. In fact, normally you treat it with a certain, what is it? What's the main antibiotic? I'm like blanking now. I'm trying to do it so fast.
A penicillin? Yeah.
And you usually try to treat it with penicillin. I'm allergic to it, so they had to come up with a new way of treating things. So I was the first person to ever be treated with this disease that is often fatal with this new approach. And then years later, I was diagnosed with having had a stroke.
Oh my God.
I was also diagnosed with, separate from that, having a brain aneurysm. And I had elective brain surgery when I was 23, right in the middle of college, speaking of college, to repair, brain surgery to repair the aneurysm. 4 years ago, I started with atrial fibrillation, which is when the atria kind of quivers, beats erratically, which dramatically influenced my life and led to some other things. A number of, basically, one thing or another related to my heart over the course of my entire life. So really from day one, I've been asking the bigger questions.
Wow.
I've never taken anything for granted. So I've had that privilege to always be able to enjoy the moment. Mm-hmm. Now the problem with that is I never really expected to live this long. Now it looks like I could end up living a lot longer, but at first it was, you'll have to have a second heart surgery by the time you graduate college, then by the time you're 20, then by the time blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't happened yet, but there's always this sort of, this thing on the horizon.
Right.
And what I've learned a lot through the years. I mean, it's allowed me to go in the direction of seeking, of information, of bigger issues, like I say, led me to read a lot, but it's also led me to see the value in frailty and illness. Mm-hmm. So when I meet someone, when I see a child that has some sort of physical illness, most people go, oh, poor thing, and they're all sad, and everything's, it's tragic, and I understand that clearly. And yet when I see a child who has something physically wrong, it lights me up inside, oddly, because it's difficult for me to not see the gift that they're giving others around them.
Wow. And I think, I mean, that's beautiful. And I also think that what that person, like I said, like we've talked about a lot in this interview, is that there's so much that we share. What that person wants is to feel normal and to be treated normal and to be treated like anybody else. It's that constant, when my mom was battling cancer, it's, you know, when she got her wig after losing her hair, it was very exciting because it's liberating. It brings you back out. But like you said, when people saw my mom still smiling, even in the hospital down to her last days, people said, the fact that she can smile, that she can be so happy and polite and all these things, even when she's in so much pain, is right. Life-changing. So,
she's your connection. She was then, and she still is now. She's your connection, your cord, your link to something greater.
Right.
And you can call it God. You can call it that thing that's in your core. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But it's that thing that we all recognize and label it, whatever we want to label it. That's something that's greater about all of us. And she's your connection to that. And she, in some ways she always was, but she was even more so when she was diagnosed, as is anyone who's going through something. And I've labeled something called New Age angst, because I'm sort of woo-woo for the people who aren't woo-woo. Like, I understand all the woo-woo stuff, but I don't really like woo-woo, even though I believe in it. I don't like the touchy-feely, like, you know, keep your distance. Let's talk intellectually about these ideas I believe in. But don't touch me or put beads on me. I'm not that kind of person. I believe in stuff. So, you know, I think that people like your mom, people who have gone through these things, we're all in touch with this like I said, this deeper part of ourselves. And I'm forgetting where I'm going with this now.
Being in touch with our deeper selves, that my connection to something greater, and through her illness, it reminded and reinforced that. That's kind of where you were driving towards.
Right, exactly. And I found that, this is the case in myself, this new age angst, like I say, is what I call it, where if you're doing a lot of self-improvement, let's say you're taking responsibility for your thoughts, and maybe your thoughts lead to this and that or whatever, there can be a new age angst in that, well, maybe perhaps I've brought on my heart problems.
Right.
Or the cold, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that we're going to get stuff. We're going to get sick. The most evolved humans that have ever lived, got stuff, got sick, got cancers, got heart diseases, died from this or that. Mm-hmm. And it's the powerful connection that you can have when you get it and you're going through it. That's the real key.
Right. Yeah, the actual experience itself is so much different than the idea of it.
Right. Mm-hmm. For me, my thing was, yes, it's nice to be treated normal, and I need to be recognized that I'm not going through something that's normal. Mm-hmm. So the many times I've come back from the hospital, everyone thinks, oh, great. They kind of wipe their hands and think, oh, he's home, everything's fine, he's better. And I'm thinking, that may be true to some extent, but it's like somebody coming back from a war. Now, I've never been to war. I don't ever want to go to a war.
Right.
I can't imagine it. But I can imagine coming back from something that was extreme emotionally, mm-hmm. and then trying to live a normal life with that profound change that's happened within me.
Right.
Knowing that it seems like everything's normal now. I'm back in a normal place. I look the same. Everything seems the same. And I didn't bring back the same me with mm-hmm. me. Wow. And that's not being recognized. And to some extent, it's like, I'm angry about it, but toward whom? And I don't expect anyone to get that.
Yeah.
So it's this thing where when we go through things, and we all do, to be able to recognize that we're going through things and perhaps take that learning and be able to share it with others in whatever form that we're able to, I think can be profound for both people, for both the sharer and the one being shared too. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that what happened between you and your mom is something that you'll recognize as being more and more powerful every year that goes by.
Right. That's great. I really appreciate that. And at each interview, I've learned something new, and I really hope the listeners do, because I've learned a bunch in this one. It's amazing when you just take the time to hear somebody's story and talk through it, hear about all the things you've overcome. And for the listeners, when I met John, I never would have known. He wasn't I've been sick so much, pity me. He was a happy guy, he's making everybody laugh. He does great. Just wait till you hear his voice on the app. It's fantastic. He's like a great, perfect narrator voice. But, to be this bright, shining person, happy, brings that happy energy to people around them. Through all this, it's just a demonstration that you can do it too, no matter what you're struggling with. So, John, as yet another train passes by my apartment, which will probably blare its horn in a moment.
If nothing else is a sign, that's a sign.
Yeah, I think this is God telling us that, all right, it's time. We'll give it about 10 seconds. It's the best when they come through at 3 a.m. But
right.
So to close out, so we'll do just this one last question. We'll get your closing thoughts. Then we'll tell people where they can find out more about you, and that'll be it. So, no, we ran a little long, but this has been really fascinating for me and enlightening, so I appreciate it. But, John, so the question I like to ask at the end of the interviews is, for yourself, back when you were graduating college, when you're this kid who's lost, you're not really sure, you're kind of just going on the route, you're taking the easy way, and then to become this person who did the scariest thing in the world, which is embrace what you truly wanted to do, and that was one of the most enlightening experiences in your life. What is the advice you would give yourself if you could talk to, 21-year-old you who's graduating college? And what advice would you share for the kids who are at that point right now in their life. And if I can make a special request, if you could do it in the narrator voice from the Mindify apps, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I can do that.
Good. Well, if you could try, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I would say, well, I'm hearing my voice now, so. Do the thing that you fear most. Balance it out with clear judgment, the conscious mind, and look at your life and what are those things that you fear? And head in that direction. And especially don't fear failure. In fact, embrace failure and embrace the learnings from it, because as in NLP, we would say that there is no failure, there is only feedback. You're just learning things. You might be learning what not to do, and you're definitely learning what you should be doing. And again, what you should be doing is moving toward the things that you think you fear. And as you move toward them and see them more clearly, and they become a part of you, you might find that things that you thought you feared, the things that you thought were your weaknesses, end up being your greatest strengths and your greatest contributions to your fellow man.
Wow. Yes. That was awesome. That was awesome. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you for doing that too. So that's what you guys will be hearing in the Mindify app. So that is one thing I highly recommend you go download. There are free tracks on all of the different Mindify apps that are out there, and then you can purchase them if you find they're beneficial, they're helpful. That's MINDIFI. And John, what would be some other places for people to come find you, learn more about you if they'd be curious?
Okay, yeah, the best way really is, there's like 12 different apps. The best way is to check them out. Like you said, there's at least one free track on every single one so people can just try it out. It does say it's free. It's a free download, so you download the app, and then there's one free track on every single app. Mm-hmm. And then it'll ask for your information, for your name and your email. And I would just suggest putting that in there. It's not a huge company. We're not doing a bunch of marketing, but it would allow us to let you know when we have new apps come out. And we have eventually it's going to be a big app with a website. If we have any other products coming out or promotions or anything, that's how people would be contacted. So if they have any questions, they could contact the Mindify source. They could even mention that they heard me on this, so that if for whatever reason they're not getting their needs met, I can see to it personally. Mm-hmm.
Mention the Overcoming Graduation podcast, guys. You get special treatment.
There you go. But really, I would just encourage people to give it a shot, and if it's for them, great. And they're meant to be listened to multiple times, and yes, some of them do cost money, or most of them do cost money, and I always think, you know what, it's an investment in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And that's the most important. That's the place where most people invest the least amount of time and money, and that's really where we should invest all of it, because your quality of life, when you take care of yourself, the things you do, the people you meet, everything improves. So, awesome, John. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much.
If you could hang out for another minute or two, I want to talk a bit more about the books, just so I can get some new stuff for my reading list. But yeah, we'll wrap up. And thank you so much for being on the show. That was fantastic. I think we're gonna have to do another interview soon, especially when you start launching these other. Well, you could just hypnotize me for one of the shows, and we'll go from there. But
well, we could spend half the time. I'll do a little short hypnosis. How about that?
Perfect. All right, next interview, that's what we'll do. But John, thanks again, man, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, John, dude, that was awesome.
All right, I told you I could keep going.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, you asked me one question. I probably went off for 5 minutes. Probably went off for 5 minutes.